Hey, what up? Hey, yo, what up, gamers? Welcome back to Porcupine Rambling in His Car. Again, that's the new direction for the channel. We're done with the satire and the comedy. That's all. That's fucking gay. Okay, it's 2023. American society is in shambles. We need the serious conversations, the serious gender politics. But anyway, today I want to talk about the idea of non-binary as a gender category and why I just reject that altogether, completely. And if you don't know what non-binary is, basically the idea is instead of someone living in the gender binary of men and women, they sort of exist outside of that binary and are just neither a man or a woman, or they believe that they're some sort of third gender. And yeah, this idea is just complete garbage, and it is slowly infiltrating mainstream culture. I mean, like, that's what every fucking comedian is talking about. Everyone on Twitter is fucking non-binary. I've met multiple non-binary people at this point. My 60-year-old boomer parents know what the term non-binary means, which, I mean, if they know what it is, then it's a fairly mainstream ideology. And it's even got to the point where my favorite website, Wikipedia, uses they, them pronouns for non-binary people, which makes the articles a million times more confusing to read. You can't just Control F he on an article that was written with he, him pronouns and just replace it with they. You have to go back and restructure like all the sentence structures to make they make sense. But anyway, that's just when it's affecting Wikipedia, that's when it's gone too far, in my opinion. So I wanted to explain it today why there is no such thing as non-binary. And yeah, let's go. So one of the basic premises of the non-binary perspective is basically that gender is a social construct, and these people feel they don't fall in perfectly 100% with how we define masculinity and femininity, so they sort of identify as a third category that is neither of those things. And yeah, while there is some truth to that it's kind of a social construction, just because something is a social construction doesn't mean that it is therefore it's like meaningless and we can just create whatever categories we want. What we mean when we say something is a social construct is basically that it's a man-made concept, and it can be defined slightly differently. The definition could change over time. Different societies may define this category differently. You look at something like race. That is sort of a social construction. It has changed over time. Jews used to be considered white. Even today, if you ask some people, they still might not consider Jews white. Italians didn't used to be considered white. Different countries kind of define races differently. In America, we kind of group, Japanese, Chinese, Korean, all as Asian. We group these people all as one race. But if you go to like Japan, they don't really view these people as all one race. They've distinguished between Japanese, Chinese, and Korean as three distinct things. There's certain, things like, we consider people that are half black to be black, even though, they're technically just as white as they are black. No one refers to Obama as white, even though genetically he is just as white as black. So race is a social construct. We could define race differently. It's changed over time, but that doesn't mean that race is therefore, arbitrary, and that we can, anybody could be a black person or anybody could be a white person, or that we can identify as non-racial. That's not really how it works. Just because something is a social construct doesn't mean that we can just create whatever categories we want. I think a good example that illustrates why socially constructed categories can be important is animal categories. We have, mammal, bird, amphibian, reptile. I forget the other ones. It's been a while since grade school. But yeah, these are socially constructed categories. God didn't come down and tell us that we need to create the category of mammal. We could have categorized animals differently. We could have categorized animals by just, land animal, sea animal, flying animal. or categorize them by their number of legs or their color. Or there's a million different ways we could have grouped animals, but we group them the way that we do because it's the most useful. It has the most descriptive value. That's something important about categories, is that they have descriptive value. They describe something. If I tell you that an animal is a mammal, that you instantly understand like a decent amount of things about that animal, right? It likely breathes oxygen. It likely has fur. It likely gives live birth instead of laying eggs. The females can produce milk. It produces sexually. You can fairly accurately predict a lot of things about this mammal, about something, just by knowing it's a mammal. It's not 100%. There may be some mammal that has alopecia and it doesn't have fur, right? So that might be okay. Well, even though this doesn't have fur, it's still a mammal. We discovered certain mammals that can lay eggs, and it's like, well, is this a mammal? Is this... The categories aren't 100% perfect. There's a bit of fuzz around the edges of, okay, is this a mammal? Is this some other species? But just because there's sort of fuzz around the edges and it's not a perfect category doesn't mean that we throw everything out. It's very important that mammal describes a certain thing in reality. If I told you, I discovered an animal, and you're like, well, what type of animal is it? And I say, oh, well, this animal is a blamphibia. And you're like, excuse me, what the fuck is a blamphibia? And I'm like, oh, well, a blamphibia could have any property. It could have fur, feathers, scales. It could have horns. It could have lungs. It could have gills. It could have could produce milk. It could not. It could have flippers. It could have wings. Anything could be a blamphibia if we wanted it to be. For obvious reasons, that would be like a very retarded category, right? If a category can apply to anything, then it's a useless category. It has no descriptive value whatsoever. If I tell you an animal is a blamphibia, that tells you just as much as if I just said this animal is an animal. It's a useless category because it has no descriptive value. So if we apply this sort of theory to gender, right? Gender and sex are these socially constructed things. Men created them. God didn't come down from the sky and give us a dictionary definition of how to define man. He may have done that in the Bible, actually. I don't know. I don't remember. But anyway, we have sort of different definitions of men and women that people go with. And you might say, like, it's determined by genitals. Men have penis, women have vagina. And that's a pretty accurate definition. That's probably going to be true like 99% of the time. But there are some exceptions. What if someone is born with a mutation where they are born without genitals or something? Or what if there's people that are like intersex, they're born with both elements of both genitals. It's not 100% perfect. Which gender would we group these people in? People might say, use biology. XY chromosome is man, XX chromosome is woman. But that's imperfect too. There are people that are like XYX chromosomes or XYY or something. Where would we group these people in? And some people now today would say it's not just the genitals and the chromosomes, it's also secondary sex characteristics. You can look at someone and instantly identify their gender without ever seeing their genitals or knowing their chromosomes. You just know because men are more muscular, they have facial hair, they have deeper voice. There's all these sort of secondary indicators that someone is a man. Same with women. Women have breasts, curvy hips, sort of less muscular, shorter. There's these other indicators that we use to determine gender. But this definition is also imperfect. How many secondary sex characteristics do you have to sort of be considered a man? What if someone sort of has characteristics of both sexes? What gender would they be? So we have all these sort of ways to determine gender, and they're all imperfect. There's a bit of fuzz around the edges. But again, that doesn't mean that we can just abandon the category completely. The categories of men and women clearly maps onto some sort of biological reality. That's why there's been men and women in like every society. So then we get to the non-binary categorization. And again, I would say non-binary is a useless category. It has no descriptive value. I could be non-binary. This person could be non-binary. My mom could be non-binary. Arnold Schwarzenegger could be non-binary. The only thing that makes you non-binary is just that you identify as non-binary. There is no, like, descriptive value. There is no, like, any descriptive thing about a person that makes them non-binary. It's just this, it's the same as a blamphibia. If we're talking about a person that I don't know and I ask you to describe them and you say, oh, well, this person is non-binary, that tells me just about as much as if you just said this person is a person, right? I know just as much about the person after both of those sentences. It's just like the blamphibia example. But if I tell you someone is a man, I can instantly know. I can fairly accurately predict a bunch of things about them. You tell me a woman, I know what that means. Non-binary, like, when you say non-binary, I'm literally not picturing anything in my head. There's no qualities of a non-binary person. It could be anybody. So yeah, just because it's a social construction doesn't mean that we can just create, like, nonsense categories. I feel like we're fine with just having, you know, there can be feminine men, there can be masculine women. You don't have to be a completely different gender category. It just doesn't make any sense. So yeah, and then when you get to people identifying as sort of third genders, that's just, like, completely ridiculous. And perhaps the worst aspect of this whole non-binary ideology, the part that makes me the most angry, is the grouping of non-binary people into the trans community. You know, 5 or 6 years ago, if you used the term transgender, like, it was pretty clear what that meant. It's a person who's born in a particular gender and then through hormones and surgery transitions into the opposite gender, or tries to transition to the opposite gender. But recently, this non-binary group of people have been trying to change the definition of transgender such that all transgender means is just you identify as a gender that is not your birth gender. So now non-binary people are part of this trans community. And it's just fucking cringe. These two groups are obviously not remotely the same. You know, actual transgender people have a condition called gender dysphoria that is an actual mental disorder that is recognized by doctors. It's a disorder that makes you feel like you're born into the wrong body, and it can be so severe it can cause you to kill yourself at fairly high rates. That's an actual recognized mental illness. Non-binary is not recognized by any doctor. It's just a form of retardation. To group these things like it's the same is just pathetic and cringe. It would be like changing the definition of black so that, like, Asian people are black. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. Asian people are, like, the most successful, richest, highest educated racial group. Black people are, like, the poorest, lowest educated, lowest IQ group. To group these people the same as if their struggles are the same is just fucking retarded. Like, you're not the same as a transgender person because you're a girl who, you know, doesn't like to wear makeup and decided you're non-binary today. It's just cringe. Like, hang yourself. I think what it is people of, like, you know, more privileged groups, you know, straight white women and such, you know, on the leftist hierarchy of privilege, you know, straight white women are pretty high up there. But then if they identify as non-binary today, oh my God, they can move down to the trans community. Now they're the most oppressed group. They're gonna have a million fucking blue-haired progressives guzzling their cum, yas queening them all over the internet. So I think that's why they want to group it in with the trans community, so people can pretend to be, like, oppressed. But it's fucking cringe. It's fucking pathetic. And stop. It's just disturbing. It's cringe. It's stop. So yeah, I hope this was useful in changing your worldview, debunking the non-binary ideology. Send this to your non-binary friends. Send this to your they, them, zee, zems. And yeah. Peace out. Also, fuck SoundCloud. Also, fuck Joe Rogan.